Hi, this is Nick Dawson from Talkhouse, and you're listening to the latest episode of Nobody's Ever Asked Me That. It's the spin-off series of the Talkhouse Podcast, where I talk to filmmakers, musicians, and writers, and ask them questions they've never heard before in an interview, in an effort to discover a different side of them and understand them better. My guest on this latest episode is Crispin Hellion Glover. Glover actually has a lot in common with my guest on the previous episode, Tim Blake Nelson, as he's also an actor who has now moved well beyond his thespian roots to become a really fascinating, thoughtful artist working across multiple mediums. With all that said, Glover is a unique human being, a true original. He's George McFly from Back to the Future. He's Lane from River's Edge. He's the Thin Man from the Charlie's Angels movies. He's one of the faces of the Mount Rushmore of weird David Letterman guests, up there with Harvey Pekar and Harmony Korine. He's the Ortley Kid. If you know, you know. He's also been making art books since the late 80s. He once put out a record, and he writes and directs movies that are kind of unlike anything else out there, such as What Is It?, where almost the whole cast were actors who had Down syndrome but were playing characters who did not. And It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine, a psychosexual drama co-written by, starring, and about a man with cerebral palsy with a fetish for women with long hair. Right now, Glover is promoting two different movies. His third directorial feature, Know You're Wrong, or Spooky Action at a Distance, a historical drama in which he stars opposite his father, the late Bruce Glover, who passed away earlier this year. And also the Kafka-esque drama Mr. K, in which he plays a traveling magician staying at a hotel he is inexplicably unable to leave. And full disclosure, I had a chance to see Mr. K, which I liked a lot, but not Know You're Wrong, as it had not screened for anyone before our conversation. However, Glover and I did talk about Know You're Wrong, along with a lot of other varied stuff, including the acting job he's still mad he missed out on at 13, supernatural goings-on at the chateau he bought in the Czech Republic, his very imaginative alternative to traveling by car, plus his hopes for the future of AI, not what you'd think, and his understandable reservations about self-cloning. So, let's dive in. I guess the place I'd like to start is, if I were to sort of ask you to think of a moment in your childhood that sort of captures something about your early years, like what would that be?
That's not an easy task, something to sum up the essence of my childhood. I mean, the first thing that came into my head, I'm here in Manhattan, New York, where I was born. I was born at Lenox Hill Hospital across the park. I could almost see it out of my window. And recently, I have my earliest memories are all of Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And I had to go through my parents' things at their house. And I lived in the house as well not too long ago, and I found an address that was of the apartment that we had lived in, which is not that far from where I am right now. Mm-hmm. And I walked down a path, which I know that my father and I had to go to, because I remember sledding in the park. This is like I'm 3 years old or something, and I remember sledding in the park. And I came to the hill. It was in the Riverside Park, mm-hmm. and I came to the hill. I walked down the same path, and then there was another area. It was very obvious what the pathway was that we would have taken to go to the park from the apartment building we lived in, which I also remember. Mm-hmm. And then I saw some cannons, these iron cannons, by the park, which I had not thought about since I last saw them when I was 3-something years old. Yeah. And I touched them, but I remember touching them, but it was from a different angle, looking up at them. But yeah. I was touching them as an adult. It relatively recently happened. So
that's really interesting.
That I don't know that sums up my childhood, but it was an interesting new memory. Like I saw the object and I remembered the object.
That's really interesting.
This cannon, an iron cannon. Yeah.
Is that a thing that happens to you, that in revisiting places, either from your childhood or that you were at, decades before, those places become recontextualized, that you see something different about yourself or see the place differently?
Well, yeah, there are consistencies in places that I've gone to, houses, places that I've lived in, and it just brings me memories. I've been going through houses, a couple of different houses that were childhood houses of mine, and so yeah, there's a lot of memories. The house that we moved to in Los Angeles from New York, I've been doing things at that house recently. My parents kept that house,
Hmm.
and I lived in that house from age 3 3/4 until age 13, and
Hmm.
so it's a lot of memories.
Am I remembering correctly that 13 is when you started acting?
Yes. I'm just thinking here. So wait a minute. 12. I didn't live there till 13. That your question made me realize no, we moved out from that house when I was 12 because it was the next year 13 at this other house in Mar Vista. Well, the other house was in an area called Delray, and then the other house was not too far in an area called Mar Vista.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was 13. That was the house in the year that I got an agent, and it was something that I had suggested my parents. I wasn't pushed into it at all.
Mhm.
My father, my father was an actor, and my mother a dancer and actress. And
Mhm.
they're both in this new film that I'm about to start touring with, Know You're
Yeah.
Wrong or Spooky Action at a Distance. My father, who, you know, my father was never super famous or super wealthy, but he had worked. So when I told my parents I was interested in doing this,
Mhm.
my father, he told me that he took it as a compliment, or it relieved him,
Mhm.
because he was concerned that I would think it was terrible, that there were too many struggles and problems. But no, I mean, we had a house, it was fine. I mean, it
Yeah.
was I could feel the struggles because I was raised as an only child. So when you're an only child with two parents, their problems are your problems. So you can feel everything at a young age. But I could see how things functioned and work, and things were okay ultimately. It's good that's how he took it, because you hear many people that grew up or work in the industry, and if their children want to be a part of it, they really restrain them. But my parents were fine. They were supportive. And then my
Mhm.
mother came to me with an ad in well, I had gotten one commercial when I was 13 for Coca-Cola, and on
Mhm.
the day we were supposed to shoot the commercial, uh, I I got stomach flu, and I never get stomach flu, and I wasn't nervous. I wanted to do the
Mhm.
commercial, and I couldn't. I was really mad. I'm still mad that I couldn't do that Coca-Cola commercial.
Yeah.
And but then when I was 14, my mother came to me with an ad in Variety, I believe it was, a trade magazine for the industry, and then it was a cattle call at the
Mhm.
Dorothy Chandler Pavilion Music Center in downtown Los Angeles, and it was for kids who could dance and sing for The Sound of Music, a production they were going to do there. And I looked at the ad and I said, I not a dancer or singer. And my
Mhm.
mother said, "Oh, you can do it." When my parents were married, my mother had actually made more money in her career than my father had. She had
Mhm.
done Broadway and off Broadway musicals, and she understudied Gwen Verdon
Mm.
in Damn Yankees, and then she ended up playing the character Lola in a touring show of it. She retired when I was born, but I knew that she had a career doing this. So I could tell in the way that she said it, it was like I didn't really have to worry about being a trained professional. Like, I mean, my mother was a trained professional dancer, but she knew that that wasn't what was needed, and she was right. And I went to this cattle call with, there's hundreds of people there, and then slowly you're whittled down little by little, and I kept going back in, and I got the part, which is a very confidence building thing.
Yeah. You were talking about revisiting these houses from your past. For you, how important is a sense of home as an actor, which is kind of you travel a lot, I know, but for you to have a home base, to have a place that feels settled, that feels stable, that you can go back to, where does that feature in your life in terms of its importance and how much you have sought that out over your career and particularly in the present?
Yeah, it is important, and I didn't move a lot as a kid. We lived in New York until I was three and three quarters. Then my parents bought a small house in an area called Delray. We didn't call it that at the time, but which was it's a great place now, great neighborhood. But when I was a kid, it was actually a little scary. There was some gang activity. It was different than it is now. And housing prices, of course, were very different.
Mhm.
There's no way that somebody that had the same kind of income that my parents had would be able to afford a house that in Los Angeles like that. It's just the whole economy was so different at that time. But we stayed in that house until I was 12. Then then we went to the other house, and I lived at that house until I was 18, and then I moved out. And I only lived in a few different apartments before I bought my house in Los Angeles, which I bought in 1992. Then I bought a property in the Czech Republic
Mhm.
where I make my films, and that was purchased specifically to make my film. So the new
Mhm.
film I shot in sets that I built on former horse stables slash farm buildings for the chateau, 18,000 square feet of sets.
Wow.
And so that's like a work home. And then later, I got a place in New York, which makes it easier to travel back and forth between LA and Czech. So each one of them serve different purposes, and uh, as opposed to, but I haven't really moved a lot. I've
Mhm.
continued to have places that I would call homes, and so that is relatively stable.
Yeah.
I haven't, even though I have different places, I haven't moved around a lot, or I haven't ever sold a property.
Mhm. Oh, interesting.
It's which is a long term investment strategy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in these different places, are you equally comfortable? Like, 'cause I talk to people a lot
No,
about. Right. Well, that's
no, definitely not.
right. But when in
No.
terms of your work, in terms of writing, in terms of screenplays, in terms of I know you have your book about propaganda, in terms of, maybe editing one of your films, is there one place that is the home where your mind is clear and you can really focus and do the work, or is that something that you can do anywhere?
It's a funny thing because well, I do work in all places, but the house in Los Angeles and the property in the Czech Republic are a lot of maintenance.
Mhm.
In New York, I'm in an apartment. I have an apartment which I don't have to worry about maintenance.
Yeah.
So, in a weird way, I even though I have the maintenance that I have to deal with in LA and in the Czech Republic, I'm not there to like visibly be looking at it and thinking about it and how to deal with it. In here where I am right now in New York, I, I feel more relaxed. There's something about the fact that I was born in the city, even though I didn't grow up here. I feel a bit more relaxed for various reasons at my apartment here in New York.
Mhm.
But there's beauty at the place in the Czech Republic, and it's a tremendous place to work, make my films, that
Mhm.
and which is why I bought it. So I mean and it's beautiful at the same time. It was built in the 16, well, it was reconstructed in the 1600s. There's peacocks. It's
Mhm.
pretty neat.
Yeah.
And then there's aspects about Los Angeles that are good. In January and February, the weather in Los Angeles is nice, and my house will be 100 years old next year, so it has an antiquity and a nice view of the city. So they all
Wow.
have their own qualities.
Yeah.
So yes, homes are important things.
Yeah. When you fantasize about another life in a different place, what do you picture? Is that something that you ever do?
No, I when I bought the property in the Czech Republic, it was a life decision.
Hmm.
That was that was where I knew I would continue making my films. Now this is the first film that I've shot and
Hmm.
completed at the property, which I bought for this purpose.
Hmm.
So, and it's taken way too long, but the idea is to have the infrastructure to be able to keep going with it.
Hmm.
So I don't think about fantasy of a different thing. There's a work structure that I had figured out and I stuck with and am sticking with. It's I this is how I'm planning to continue doing things now
Hmm. That's great.
forward.
That's
And
great.
the last more than 20 years I've been dealing with this, working on this.
Amazing. A question that I think is maybe has a different relevance or resonance for you as somebody who was started acting so young. But at what age did you first feel like an adult and have that sort of confidence of being an adult?
Well, I mean, of course, I didn't really feel like an adult till probably quite a bit later. Although I moved out of my parents' house at age 18. A lot of people don't quite do that. I never went back. I was out and I stayed out. Not that anything was wrong. I just needed to be on my own. As an actor, you can claim unemployment.
Hmm.
So I remember going to the unemployment agency when I was 14, and you had to go and stand in line and fill out forms. I felt like that was a very adult
That
thing to
is,
do.
yeah.
But but I was 14, so you know, I mean, I was there with my mother, so
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
I wasn't on my own at the employment. And my mother always would come until I was 18, would always be there. I think sometimes parents don't always go to the sets, which I think is a mistake. I think it is important that uh, a parent or some close family member is
Hmm.
always around, because if there's somebody closely supervising a family, nothing
Right.
bad can possibly happen. So my mother was always there until I turned 18, and then I was on my own.
Yeah. What was that shift like for you when she wasn't there?
Fine. I didn't I remember when I went to San Francisco when I was 14, one of the a girl that played my sister, I think her father had been the stage manager at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, and for some reason she was able to travel and stay with cast members that worked in the show in The Sound of Music. When we went to San Francisco at the Orpheum Theater, we were there for a couple of months and first were at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles. And I remember I wanted to be on my own. I didn't want my mother to be there with me at an apartment in San Francisco, 1970. You know, but I'm think I could do that. But of course, no. Of course, it was right that she was there.
Yeah.
No, I was very glad to be independent. I didn't want my parents or I mean my father didn't come to the sets. That was always my mother when I was a kid doing that. But I, you know, who wants their mother around when you're on the set working? But of course, it was good that she did that.
Mhm.
But once I was very glad to be independent
Yeah.
and off. I did not miss having having my mother or parents around at all.
Do you remember your dreams? Is there a recent dream that you can remember that you could relate to me?
I usually don't. It's hard for me to remember my dreams. I sometimes do, but it usually has to be fairly extreme, like a nightmare or something. Sometimes I remember I tried to do a dream journal. I like
Hmm.
remembering them,
Hmm.
but for some reason I have a lot of things that I think about immediately. I do have a lot to do. I'm a little bit overwhelmed, like with the property management, my own filmmaking. It's there's a lot to do. So I think when I get up, I wish I contemplated more and I did remember my dreams more. But I've been, especially in the last couple of years, there's been a lot to deal with.
Hmm.
And so dreams, even if I want to try to remember them, it's like, oh, I've got to deal with something. And then it goes out of my mind.
Yeah.
It leaves my head.
For the dreams that you do remember, do they ever sort of permeate your work in some facet?
No. Usually the films there's a practicality that I'm reacting to something. So, like this movie, I developed it for myself and my father to act in together. He and I had never acted together before. And then the structure of the buildings, the former horse stables, they're not square like a standard soundstage shooting studio would be. They're long. So I knew what the structure was, and that meant that there were ideas I had about some of the thematic elements that I wanted to get into it that had to do with karma and generational passing of things, and trains had something to do with it. And then the script came from knowing what I could essentially build and then also utilize later for uh, upcoming productions, so that it wouldn't just be sets built for one production, but more like a backlot that I could use for future productions, which is what I'm planning to do. So it's more practical than kind of a dream that floats in. And like I've listened to interviews with Fellini, who's one of the very excellent descriptors of his process, and he talks about dreams influencing his work. And of course, his work is fantastic, but I've not had that happen. It's been very practical oriented.
Sort of maybe there's a slight thematic tie from question to question, but what are your feelings on the supernatural? Have you ever seen a ghost? Because
It's really funny because just yesterday I was doing an interview and somebody asked me exactly that question, which I hadn't been asked that before by anybody, and now two times in a row. Well, in my property in the Czech Republic, which I bought in 2003, I was raised uh, almost anti-religiously. Like my father was raised Swedish Methodist in the 1930s and 40s, and that particular, well, he was worried that as he was growing up that he was going to go to hell. They preached hell a lot. If you wanted to go to see a movie or dance or flirt with girls, what it meant, you were going to go to hell. So my father believed as a kid that he was going to go to hell, and he did not want to raise me that way at all. So if anything, I wasn't just raised atheistically, I was raised like it, my father my father died earlier this year,
yeah.
and not too long ago, within the last year, I was with him, and he said, "You don't believe in any of this God stuff, do you?" He was like really devoutly atheist, and I went to a private school that was very science oriented, academic oriented. I I grew up calling myself an atheist, so I've always had a fair amount of skepticism. But the thing is atheism, to say there is no God, or is on some level similar to theism, meaning to know or to believe or to feel there is or it isn't. And of course, none of us can actually know anything about what happens after death. The only people that know are people that die and stay dead, and none of those
Yes.
people can tell us.
Yeah.
So everybody has to be agnostic whether they think so or not. None of us know. So I still have a skepticism, but I did have something happen at my property in Czech not too long after I became the owner of it. And I don't, I because I'm very skeptical about these things, I won't go into too many details, but it's the kind of thing that if I describe it to anybody, it's the kind of thing that say that was a paranormal experience, and it was I don't quite know how to say what happened. How what was it? My mind? Did I hallucinate this thing? I wasn't on any thing that would make me hallucinate. I
Hmm.
was,
Hmm.
it, and it wasn't. It was a strange thing, and I many people would call it a paranormal experience. I don't, and again, I don't know what to call it. I don't know if I hallucinated it. I don't know if it was another dimension opening up. I
Right.
don't know, but it was interesting. It wasn't a bad thing. It
Hmm.
was it was unnerving, but there was nothing negative that came out of it. It was people that have been at the property have said things like it's enchanted as opposed
Hmm.
to haunted.
That seems like a nice middle path.
It has a positive
Yeah.
yeah, the place has a positive energy to it. It is nice there.
Yeah. I was very sorry to hear about your father's passing.
Thank you.
Did that shift the way that you now think about death in any way?
No, no, no. No, and my mother had died in 2016, and my parents were married. They remained married,
Hmm.
and that was a bit surprising when that happened. Actually,
Hmm.
with my father, I could kind of tell things were happening, but no, I, I don't, I'm not. It's like I like being alive, of course, but well, I guess that's not, of course. Some people don't like being alive, but I like being alive,
Hmm.
and but I also don't have a negative feeling about death, even with the idea if one has an atheistic tendency, the concept of what would happen after death if there is nothing else is not dissimilar for what I experienced before birth, which
Hmm.
I have no issue with what
Right.
happened
Right.
before what
Yeah.
I experienced before birth. So I'm not concerned about that.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, one would like to have a pleasant going out,
Right. Yes.
and who knows? You never know. One never knows what's going to happen. So, but I no, I mostly think about what I need to do. That's
Right.
mainly what I think about.
I'm the same. Sort of similar to you, I am not sort of scared of what happens after death. It's sort of like the thing that happens just before, but then also this thing of like,
Sure.
I'm a father, I'm a husband. I feel like a responsibility to stay alive. I have, as like you, I have lots of things
Right.
that are either on my plate short term or I want to do long term. So it is this,
Right.
it's a curious thing of like I'm sort of theoretically at peace with the idea of my own death, but in practice it's something that I'm still actively, understandably, as most people, as you said, like actively
Right.
resisting. But I, for me, in many ways, like I'm relatively okay with pain as a concept also, but uncertainty is something that I struggle with a lot. I'm in terms of that sort of dichotomy, pain versus uncertainty, where do you land on that one?
Yeah. Well, pain is not. Nobody likes pain, or I guess some people like pain, but I, I, yeah. I remember one time, like I've never been suicidal. I'm not depressive. I luckily have whatever it is, chemistry that makes me feel relatively positive and optimistic. I can get anxious, I can get irritated, but I'm not depressive. But so I've never been suicidal. But I remember one time I had some kind of thing where I was nauseous,
Mhm.
and I was lying down by a bathtub or in the bathroom. So, and I really didn't feel well.
Mhm.
And I think of myself as this preservationist, and I was nauseous, and I kind of thought, well, if I died now and the nausea stopped, that'd be okay.
Yes.
I just didn't want to feel nauseous, but I'm not suicidal, but that's a relatively low level of pain, so to speak. So who knows what one feels like if somebody's in tremendous pain? Nobody that can make people not want that to be happening.
Yeah.
So that's understandable.
I've had a similar experience as I was on a boat at night experiencing really extreme nausea. And I had the same thought. I was like, if I were to just, jump into the water and sink
Yeah.
down, the nausea would end and I would be okay with that. It was completely
Right.
illogical. I was not suicidal, but
Right.
it was like
Right.
the
Right.
most immediate relief was
Right.
bizarrely, death
Right.
at sea.
Yeah. Right.
And I think there's something about that, like,
Yeah, it's funny because luckily I don't get nauseous, but we've talked about it twice in the conversation because I talked about that commercial I didn't
right.
do because I did have the stomach flu. Luckily, I don't get nauseous very often. Because I really don't like it. Luckily, that doesn't happen to me. But yeah, anything to avoid nausea, I will. I don't. I don't want to be nauseous, and luckily, I'm not very often.
Yeah, fully agree on that one. This is a question I have for a lot of people, but it's always something that intrigues me. What is the difference do you feel between the way others see you and the way you see yourself?
Oh, well, that I know. I mean, I have a persona, and then there's been a kind of a gossip thing, or even a purposeful kind of. There was a lawsuit, and that were exposed as having done something illegal have made a purposeful agenda of saying things about me that aren't true to hurt me because
Mhm.
they want to justify their illegal actions. It's really been a true bane. It affects a lot of things. I really don't like it because I mean it's something anybody that's in the public eye deals with on some level. There's always going to be something, but I do feel. I mean, part of it is from characters that I've played or things I've done in art or performance or public appearances, what have you, that will lead people to believe that I could be anything,
Mhm.
which is very different from what my private life is. Um, so, but it's like then there's always this danger if anybody wants to cause me an issue, and there are people that will, they'll get mad at you or whatever. I can tell if somebody's really has an agenda because they'll try to utilize that against me in some way.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
kind of public persona that can be misinterpreted as, some kind of insane, unreasonable human being. But I mean, it's like I have an interest. I've always had an interest in surrealism and unusual art,
Mhm.
and so if that becomes part of what I put out artistically or crafts wise, and then it gets mixed up as to this person is crazy, difficult, whatever. It's
Mhm.
just that gets frustrating. I mean, I am specific about things that I want to do artistically,
Mhm.
and I'll really try to accomplish those things. And if somebody doesn't understand what I'm trying to do, it can I'm sure get frustrating for them. But I always have a something that I'm wanting to accomplish that's a positive thing.
Mhm.
And yeah, so sometimes I'll genuinely feel truly misinterpreted, misunderstood as to what's going on.
Mhm.
I think of myself as a reasonable person,
Yeah.
and I mean like my film. This is my third feature film. I fund these films. I edit the films. These are
Mhm.
very. It's like I'll be described as an eccentric, which I understand, but these kinds of regimens are very centric. They are very, you have to follow
Yeah.
mathematical constructs in order to accomplish these things. So which, I mean, on some level, it's okay if people think I'm an eccentric artist, fine. But it's if it starts being misinterpreted as that I'm a crazy, dangerous something, that, or unreliable or anything, I've had to be reliable for a long time in order to, particularly with my own filmmaking. It's just, I
Mhm.
don't have corporations behind me doing these things. Which is a lot more work than if you're working within a corporate structure, because I'm having to make sure it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes me a long time. I've been working on this particular film for a long time. I would like it to be faster, but it's also, uh, there's an element of just making sure it is right, and that can take time.
Yeah. To me, the person I see is somebody who has sort of the spirit and maybe some of the aesthetics of like a European artist from the first half of the 20th century, but that juxtaposition of you within an American capitalist structure, that seems like a big disconnect. And it seems like maybe that's a big part of.
Yeah. That's definitely, that's a very, very accurate assessment, because the United States has gone into, I don't know what you call it, hypercapitalism. And it has to do, there is this corporate structure that, what we call corporations right now in the United States, were not legal in the 1700s.
Mhm.
What we were so used to, this corporate structure that the United States has become a subsidiary to, essentially,
Mhm.
is, people are so used to it that they don't even think about it. But from what I learned, this is when I was in junior high school. I, I've I've looked up the term that I remember learning, and I can't find it. Well, I remember the term being called a lock stock company, but I've never been able to find it. But the idea was that businesses had to get a permission to do what they were going to accomplish, state what a product essentially they were
Mhm.
going to make,
Yeah.
how that was going to affect the community, the society, and then they were allowed for a certain amount of time to make a certain amount of profit, and then the company would cease. And if they wanted to continue, they would have to reapply, and it would have to be assessed if it was okay for society. But through briberies, obviously, what we now call corporations became allowed sometime in the 1800s, and it's just, they originally knew that it would get out of balance if corporations could become these kind of super tyrannies, which is what has
Mhm.
happened. And now the United States government is essentially a subsidiary to multiple corporate structures. And so, in terms of art, in terms of filmmaking, basically all films that we see are corporate structures. Even if something is a so-called independent film,
Mhm.
if it's distributed, that's distributed by a corporate structure. So the corporate, a in terms of law, corporations are have to make sure that their shareholders can make profit, and it would be against the law for them to not do so.
Mhm.
So if a corporation is producing a film, and the film is doing something that's against corporations, they would almost be breaking the law
Yes.
for for making a message that's, so that doesn't happen. They won't make a film, they won't produce, they won't fund, and they will not distribute something that truly questions that structure.
Mhm.
And then if one does do that, you're kind of an enemy to this structure. And then people, what they might not even feel it or intellectualize it, but they just say, oh, no, that person's weird.
Mhm.
That's just in a negative meaning. Of course, the etymological word for weird is something aligned to werewolf. something to do with the undead.
Yeah.
But it's come to me. Weird can be a positive term. Many people like the term weird,
Yeah.
and it can be used as a derisive term. So,
Yeah.
but what I mean to say is that if somebody questions the corporate situation, there are so many people that are truly embedded into it, and there are people that are artistic, that some of them will somehow be able to navigate through that system and actually come up with good work. Even in filmmaking, there are good
Mm.
filmmakers
Yeah.
that have somehow navigated within the corporate structures and come up with excellent, great movies.
Yeah.
It's so rare, though. It's
Yeah.
so rare, and I don't feel I'm good at navigating that. So it's better for me just to take years and do it myself, act in other people's films. This has, I'm talking about two films because I'm also in Mr. K,
Hmm.
which I act in films, and I'm glad to act in films, which it's a craft that I've been doing for a while. I kind of switched my thought process about a long time ago. Acting I thought of as my art, but then I needed to make my films, and I needed to make money as an actor to fund my own films because I knew I couldn't work
Hmm.
navigate within the corporate structure. So I'm grateful to be able to act in other people's movies, and
Yeah.
ideally if they can have some kind of artistic integrity. And there was an interesting quality to Mr. K. So
Definitely.
this is a happy medium when I can utilize something, be part of something that has some kind of artistic merit, and then uh, try to work it into my own filmmaking. That's what I now consider my art.
Yeah. You can sort of put whatever spin on this question that you wish, but how much money is the right amount of money?
Well, there are just basics that you have to deal with. Of course, everybody needs food, shelter, uh, but filmmaking is expensive. So, what one needs in order to get that done, that it takes a fair amount. So,
Mhm.
I talk about. I mean, who knows what the right societal
Yeah.
structures are? We do live in a capitalist structure, and I can have a lot of criticism about capitalist structure, but at the same time, if I didn't just sit with make the capitalist structure function for being able to make my films, I wouldn't be able to make my films.
Yeah.
So it's a strange duality where I see the issues with it, and yet I'm also you have to step in and be a part of it, because otherwise, I mean, if somebody becomes an ascetic, that they sit in a cave and
Hmm.
and meditate, and that's an interesting form as well. And I can understand the arguments for doing that. But if you want to make things that are a part of society, particularly something like a film, which is expensive, I've got to step into the structures that exist and make them work on one level or another.
Yeah.
But I definitely see the troubles with the system as well.
Hmm. Um, what's the scariest thing that you've ever done?
Um, Probably driving, and I drive regularly, but driving that's at least statistically the most dangerous thing that basically almost anybody that drives does. That's
Yeah.
really dangerous.
Yeah.
But I have some antique cars that I've had since the 1980s. I I don't. It's funny because I have a number of cars, and I sort of wish we didn't have cars in
Mm.
general. I wish we didn't. I wish we had just like public transportation pods that went underground and went to the location you needed. And we
Hmm.
didn't. We just had bicycles, and roads were trees, and traffic is just. We really shouldn't have cars anymore. But I
Yeah.
understand that's not an easy thing.
Yeah. When you said you wish that there weren't cars, maybe just because your set used to be stables. I was wondering what your relationship is with horses and whether you ride or anything like that as well.
I had to ride a horse in a production I was in, which was nice. They said, "What kind of horse would you like?" I said, "Just give me nice, easy horse," which they
Uh-huh.
did. They were a very nice, easy horse, and they're obviously very sensitive. Like you could tell on a take, the horse knew what was going on because there was some fire and
Hmm.
some commotion, and I could tell the horse was getting nervous, and that he could see the take was about to happen and they'd say action, then he'd get very nervous. We only had to do a few takes, but they're sensitive animals. I like them, but
Hmm.
yeah, one has to
Yeah.
be sensitive with a horse.
Yeah. So you're not going to replace your cars with antique horses, I'm guessing.
No, I bicycle a lot.
Okay.
Bicycles are an amazing invention. When you think about when bicycles came into being and horses were around, I can see where what it's still a fantastic invention. It's just and that it uses the least amount of energy. You just have the two tires hitting the ground. I bicycle every city that I'm in. That's as much as I can possibly get around on bicycle. That is what I try to do. I
Mm.
definitely prefer it, and usually it's faster than a car, especially locally.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true here in New York. If and they have a thing called City Bike,
Yeah.
so you can. I use that all the time, and there are kiosks. So then, if it's raining or something, and you need to get on the subway or in a car or what have you, then that's fine, or walk. But bicycle, and I have an electric bicycle in Los Angeles
Hmm.
and in the Czech Republic. I have a bicycle that I go to the train station and take it on the train and go into Prague. So I like bicycling. Usually it's faster, but even if it took a little bit longer, you get some exercise. It's just a pleasant way to travel.
Absolutely. If you could suddenly have a new skill, what would it be?
Um, Let me think. I'm trying to. I I don't have assistants. I don't have. You hear about a lot of people that hire assistants. I've heard people say, "Oh, you need an assistant." But my experience is that if I essentially need to instruct somebody to do the things that I need done, and they're usually very particular,
Hmm.
and it would take me as much time to have an assistant do things as just doing it, kind of. But
Hmm.
I really have been overwhelmed with time
Hmm.
in particularly the last 2 years, and I am a lot of people are really against AI. I really am hoping that AI and robotic assistance can help. I know that's not exactly a skill, but if there was some way that I could have something that would make my time be more. I'm pretty good about compartmentalizing time, but there's been a fair amount to do, and also in these last couple of weeks, which happens right before you start premiering a film. Like there's still stuff going on with the film I'll premiere on the second
Hmm.
at the Museum of Modern Art, and I don't. There's a lot to do all the
Hmm.
time,
Yeah.
even right now.
I feel like in the movie version of our world, maybe you could clone yourself and we wouldn't need AI and there could just be a sort of a second Crispin Hellion Glover.
Yeah, but then of course yeah, but you think about that, and then the millisecond after there's the clone, there's two separate entities, and who knows what clone really wants? Maybe
Right.
clone hates you, or then might hate clone, and
Yeah.
then you want to kill each other. It could be very dangerous.
That's true. That's true. Well, let's avoid that situation.
Luckily, I don't think we're not close to that.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think we have to wrap up, unfortunately, but it's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the unusual interview style. I appreciate it. It was a very creative kind of interview. I enjoyed it.
Thanks so much to Crispin Hellion Glover for talking with me, and thanks to you for listening. Mr. K is out now in select theatres, and Know You're Wrong, or Spooky Action at a Distance, is playing at the IFC Centre in New York City and will screen at theatres around the country over the coming months. Check crispinglover.com for more info. This episode was produced by Myron Kaplan, and the theme music is by The Range. If you haven't already, please rate, review, and subscribe to the Talkhouse Podcast. And keep your eyes and ears peeled for upcoming episodes of Nobody's Ever Asked Me That, as there's lots more good stuff in the works.